Eddie Curry's family tragedy. If you think bad contracts and locker room drama are as dark as the NBA gets, think again. Eddie Curry, a 7-footer drafted straight out of high school by the Chicago Bulls, saw his life veer into territory no player, no parent, no human being should ever have to walk through. His story? It's not just tragic, it's horrifying. In 2009, Eddie's ex-girlfriend Nova Henry and their 10-month-old daughter Ava were found shot to death in their Chicago townhouse. The killer wasn't some stranger in the shadows. It was a man Nova knew all too well, her former attorney, Frederick Goings. And if that name already makes you feel uneasy, it should. Goings wasn't just her legal representative in a custody dispute with Curry. He was also a man she had grown terrified of. She'd tried to break ties, filed for an order of protection, did everything she could to keep him away. But Goings wasn't the type to walk away quietly. When Nova hired a different attorney and cut ties, he responded not with a nasty email or a court battle, but with a gun. On January 24, 2009, he walked into her home and murdered her, shot her multiple times. Her baby daughter was in her arms. He shot her too. The only person left in that house was Noah, Eddie Curry's 3-year-old son, who somehow survived, sitting next to his mother's lifeless body, covered in blood, traumatized beyond anything you or I could imagine. When police arrived, Noah didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just quietly said the name, Fred. The case took 4 long years to close. Goings tried every trick in the book to delay the trial, but in 2013 a jury saw right through it. He was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. No parole, no second chance. Eddie Curry never tried to spin the story for sympathy or attention. He just took his son, held him tighter than ever, and tried to move forward, one impossible day at a time. The fall of Robert Swift. Robert Swift looked like a character out of a basketball fairy tale. 7 feet 1 inch, red-haired, goofy smile, drafted straight out of high school. The Seattle Supersonics took him 12th overall in 2004, hoping to develop a unicorn before unicorns were trendy. What they got instead? A full-blown cautionary tale with meth, rifles, and a foreclosure sign. Swift's career fizzled out almost as quickly as it began. Injuries derailed him early, but poor decisions finished the job. By his mid-20s, he wasn't in the league. He wasn't even near it. By 2013, he was squatting in his foreclosed mansion. Yes, mansion. Living among garbage, bullets, and what looked like the set of a low-budget apocalypse movie. Police raided the house and found multiple guns, ammunition, beer cans, stacked like trophies, and syringes. It wasn't just rock bottom. It was rock bottom's basement. Then came the arrests, drug possession, illegal firearms, and a particularly infamous incident where he tried to help a friend collect a debt with an AK-47. Real subtle, because nothing says reasonable negotiation like a semi-automatic weapon. But here's the twist. Swift didn't disappear. He got sober. He owned up. And in recent years, he's been coaching young athletes and speaking out about addiction. Is he a hero now? No, but he's alive, which for a minute looked like the longest shot of his career. Keon Clark's downward spiral. Keon Clark was built like a highlight reel, long, athletic, freakishly talented, but he also came with a warning label, contents, may be flammable when mixed with alcohol. And unfortunately, Keon was mixing. Clark once famously said, "I never played a game sober. Not one. Not in college, not in the NBA. Not even when facing Shaq," which honestly is either bold or suicidal. He battled alcoholism throughout his career, hiding it behind dunks, blocks, and a laid-back smile that masked something much darker. After leaving the NBA, the wheels came off. He was arrested multiple times. Gun charges, DUIs, and drug possession. At one point, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison after violating probation and possessing firearms as a felon. His defense? He didn't remember buying the guns. Classic blackout shopping spree. Clark has since tried to turn the page, speaking about addiction and using his story as a warning. But for years he was a ghost of what he could have been, proof that talent can't outrun demons when they're riding shotgun every night. Rodney Rogers' accident. Rodney Rogers had hands like cinder blocks and a jumper so smooth it should have been illegal. He was the kind of power forward who could knock you down in the paint and then drain a 3 before you got up. And after basketball, he found a second life riding dirt bikes. until one ride ended everything. In 2008, Rogers was thrown from his bike in a freak accident that left him paralyzed from the shoulders down. One minute, he's flying down a trail. The next, he's in a hospital, being told he'll never move anything below his neck again. And yet, he didn't spiral. Instead of disappearing, Rogers turned his tragedy into fuel. He launched a foundation to support people with spinal cord injuries. He became an advocate, a mentor, a voice. He couldn't walk, but he stood taller than ever. Most people would have given up. Rodney Rogers became bigger than basketball. He became a symbol of resilience. Nicky Van Exel's conviction. Here's a story you won't find in your average "Where Are They Now?" NBA feature. In 2010, Nicky Van Exel, son of former All-Star Nick Van Exel, shot and killed his best friend, Bradley Bassie over a disagreement in his home with a shotgun. According to prosecutors, Nicky panicked after the shooting and dumped the body near Lake Ray Hubbard in Texas, like this was some low-budget Netflix crime doc. Later, he confessed, claiming it was an accident, but the jury didn't buy it. In 2013, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. His dad sat through the trial in visible agony, once a flashy NBA point guard, now just a father watching his son's life disintegrate. This wasn't a scandal. This was a tragedy, a complete implosion of two families, and a reminder that legacy means nothing when bullets start flying. Greg Oden's arrest. Greg Oden wasn't just a draft pick. He was the pick. Number 1 overall in 2007. A once-in-a-generation big man, or so we thought. Injuries turned his NBA career into a sad montage of surgeries, rehab sessions, and unfulfilled potential. But even after the final buzzer sounded on his time in the league, Oden's name would come back into the headlines. This time, not for a comeback, but for a mugshot. In 2014, Greg Oden was arrested in Indiana after punching his ex-girlfriend during an argument at her mother's house. The police report read like a horror script. She was bleeding, swollen, and the scene was chaotic. Oden didn't run. He admitted it. He stood there and said, "I was wrong," in a tone that was probably more defeat than remorse. He was charged with battery resulting in serious bodily injury, a felony. The public was shocked. The media, less so. Oden had always looked haunted by pressure, by injuries, by something inside. This incident wasn't just a red flag. It was a flare shot into the sky, signaling that whatever had broken him physically had also fractured something deeper. He eventually received probation, mandatory counseling, and quietly faded from the spotlight. These days, Oden talks about regrets and redemption. But for a man once called the next Bill Russell, he became something else entirely. A tragic reminder of how quickly greatness can unravel, both on and off the court. Derrick Rose's controversy. In 2011, Derrick Rose was the MVP, the youngest ever, the hometown hero in Chicago. Humble, quiet, explosive. He was the league's darling. But then came an interview that cracked that pristine image, even if only slightly. During a sit-down with ESPN, the magazine, Rose was quoted asking, "What, you don't think we have a drug problem in the NBA?" Boom! That one line was enough to set the NBA media machine into full panic mode. Was D-Rose Mr. Clean, Mr. Crossover, implying that players were juicing, that the league was turning a blind eye? Rose later backtracked, claiming he was misquoted or misunderstood. The context, he said, was about painkillers and recovery, not PEDs. But the damage was done. The quote spread like wildfire. Sports radio shows ran with it for weeks. Analysts dissected every syllable. The NBA issued a polite but pointed denial. And Rose, he went back to playing ball, and unfortunately, tearing ligaments. Was it a slip of the tongue, a peek behind the curtain, or just a badly handled PR moment? Whatever it was, it showed that even the Golden Boys can get scorched when they brush up against the NBA's darkest taboos, Shawn Kemp's legal troubles. If you remember Shawn Kemp as the high-flying Rain Man who dunked on fools with Reckless, abandoned in the 90s, good. But that Shawn Kemp didn't make it out of the NBA clean. His post-career headlines sound more like a rap sheet than a retirement party. After his playing days, Kemp was arrested multiple times on drug-related charges, most notably for possession of marijuana, cocaine, and weapons. Fans, who once watched him fly above the rim, were now seeing him cuffed and walking into courtrooms. And just when you thought his saga had cooled off, 2023 dropped the strangest headline yet. Shawn Kemp involved in a shooting over a stolen phone. Yes, a grown man, six-time All-Star, allegedly tracked his stolen iPhone using GPS, drove to confront the suspect, and ended up in a shootout in a Tacoma parking lot like it was Breaking Bad, NBA edition. Charges were eventually dropped after evidence suggested he acted in self-defense, but still, it was the kind of headline that made you ask, what the hell happened to Shawn Kemp? His businesses, restaurants, a cannabis shop, are now his main hustle. And ironically, yes, one of his ventures is in legal weed. Full circle, right? The fall of William Bedford. William Bedford looked like he was built in a lab for NBA success. 7-foot center, smooth game, soft hands. But while teams hoped for a dominant big man, what they got was a player being dragged under by a monkey on his back. Crack cocaine. After being selected number 6 overall in the 1986 draft, Bedford bounced from team to team with little impact. Not because he lacked talent, but because he was battling addiction off the court. Rehabs, suspensions, more rehabs, arrests. It became a grim pattern. By the time he left the league, Bedford had become less of a player and more of a cautionary tale. His post-NBA years were worse. He served multiple stints in prison for possession and parole violations. At one point, he was arrested in a drug sting while living in a halfway house, like something straight out of The Wire. Eventually, Bedford began speaking out to young athletes, warning them, telling them his story. Not for pity, but because, in his own words, it's better to be a lesson than a headline. And he was both. The downfall of Leon Smith. Leon Smith's name doesn't ring many bells for casual fans, but his story is one of the darkest in NBA history, and it barely even happened in the NBA. Drafted at 18 by the Spurs in 1999 and traded to Dallas, Smith never played a game in the league. Within months, he was institutionalized after a severe mental breakdown. He sent his ex-girlfriend a box with dead flowers and a note that read, "Dead people need company too." Then, in a moment of deep crisis, he swallowed 250 aspirin and attempted suicide. He survived. But his NBA career was over before it began. Over the years, Smith would surface in minor leagues and overseas courts, but the real battle was always internal. His story was less about basketball and more about the brutal failure of the league's support system for young athletes, especially those coming from troubled backgrounds. Leon Smith wasn't a bust, he was a warning shot, and no one really listened. Darius Miles' bankruptcy. Darius Miles was supposed to be one of the cool kids. Cornrows, headband, the infamous double tap to the head celebration with Q-Rich. He was fun, fast, and flashy. But behind the charisma was financial chaos that would eventually bury him. In 2016, Darius filed for bankruptcy. He had earned nearly $62 million over his career, and somehow, it was all gone. Every last dollar. Cars, houses, bad investments, and a few too many yes men burned through his fortune like wildfire. At the time of the filing, Miles claimed less than $100,000 in assets. But here's the twist. Miles didn't just vanish. He pivoted. Today, he co-hosts the Knuckleheads podcast with Quentin Richardson, where they interview players past and present. It's raw, honest, and miles better than the sanitized versions ESPN serves up. Darius found his voice off the court, after losing everything. Sometimes the best version of a person doesn't come until after the worst chapter. Luther Wright, the invisible giant. Luther Wright stood 7'2" and weighed nearly 300 pounds. On paper, he was supposed to be a wall in the paint. In practice, he was a ghost. The Utah Jazz selected him in the first round of the 1993 draft, hopeful they'd found the next great big man. But Wright's problem wasn't physical, it was mental. From day one, his behavior was erratic. He showed up late, he missed practices, he couldn't grasp the plays. It wasn't arrogance, it was something much deeper. Just months after his NBA debut, Luther disappeared, literally. They found him wandering the streets, disoriented and talking to himself. He was soon committed to a psychiatric facility. Diagnosis: schizophrenia. He never played in the league again. What came next was even more heartbreaking. In 1994, he was arrested for destroying property. He smashed the walls of his own apartment with a bat, as if he were trying to beat something he couldn't see, but that haunted him from within. He spent the following years in and out of mental institutions. His story is rarely mentioned during draft retrospectives. no tributes, no redemption arcs, just silence. Today, Wright lives in New Jersey. He speaks to youth about mental health. His voice trembles like someone who walked through hell and made it back. There's no moral here, just a question. How many talents like him are lost because no one knows how to help? Melvin Turpin, the man crushed by fame. Melvin Turpin had one of the cruelest nicknames in NBA history, Dinner Bell Mel, not for his play, for his weight. It was a brutal way of saying he ate more than he trained. But Turpin was more than that. He was a college star at Kentucky, a solid shooter, a 7-footer with a soft touch. The Cavs took him 6th overall in the 1984 draft, right before Charles Barkley and John Stockton, and that was the beginning of the end. Turpin wasn't ready for the pressure. The media mocked him. Fans booed him. Coaches grew frustrated. He never found his place in the locker room or in his own skin. He played only 5 seasons before walking away. Then came the silence. He went back home, worked as a security guard, gained weight, lost it, fell into deep depressions. No one called. No one checked in. In 2010, at just 49 years old, Melvin Turpin took his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No one saw it coming. Or maybe they did, but no one wanted to look. Today, his name shows up on biggest draft busts lists, but no one talks about the emotional toll, what it's like to be branded a failure at 22 and carry that label to the grave. Walter Davis, the star who fell to the white line. Walter Davis was pure elegance, smooth with the ball, a graceful shooter, lightning quick. They called him the Greyhound, because he glided across the court with animal-like fluidity. Rookie of the Year in 1978, 6-time All-Star, a legend in Phoenix. But behind that perfect exterior was a secret soon to become public: cocaine. In the 1980s, the NBA was drenched in white powder, but few names were as public as Davis. In 1987, he was called to testify in a federal case against his own teammates. The Suns were under investigation in a drug scandal straight out of an HBO series, and Davis testified in exchange for immunity. That made him a pariah. On the court he could still score, but off it, no one trusted him. He was the snitch, the man who broke the locker room code. After the trial, he played a few more years, put up decent numbers, but he was never the same. Fans remembered him, sure, but they judged him, looked at him like he had an asterisk tattooed on his forehead. He retired quietly. Today he works as an advisor in Charlotte. He rarely talks about the scandal, but in interviews there's a sadness in his eyes, like he's still trying to outrun his past. Chris Gatling, the all-star who ended up in a jail cell. Chris Gatling was never a superstar, but he had game. In 1997 he was an all-star. He had a weird style, left-handed, clunky footwork, but efficient. He played for 10 teams, a journeyman. But what makes Gatling stand out isn't what he did on the court. It's what he did after. In 2013, he was arrested for illegally squatting in an Arizona home. Yes, you read that right. Squatting. He broke into a vacant house, lived there, and then tried to rent it out on Craigslist, as if it were his, as if no one would notice, as if he weren't a recognizable former NBA player. Cops caught him quickly, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Gatling was also hit with charges for wire fraud, check forgery, and probation violations. A cocktail of crimes more fitting for a LinkedIn scammer than an ex-all-star. Money, gone. Fame, forgotten. Respect, buried. Chris Gatling made bail and avoided serious time, but his name is permanently stained. Today, he lives far from the spotlight. No one asks for autographs. No one invites him to broadcast games. And if someone asks about him, the answer is short. He was good. Until he made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Javaris Crittenton, from NBA prospect to convicted killer. Javaris Crittenton was supposed to be part of the next generation of NBA talent. Drafted in 2007 by the Lakers, he had the tools: speed, court vision, a solid jump shot. He bounced around teams, including a stint with the Washington Wizards. But the name Crittenton wouldn't become infamous for basketball. It would become infamous for blood. It started with that bizarre locker room incident in 2009, the one that involved guns in the locker room. You remember that, right? Gilbert Arenas and Crittenton allegedly pointing pistols at each other. Over a card game, the NBA suspended both, but while Arenas returned to the court, Crittenton spiraled. Fast forward to 2011, Crittenton, now out of the league and allegedly involved in gang activity, was charged with the murder of Julian Jones, a 22-year-old mother of 4. She was shot in a drive-by, a mistaken target. Police said Crittenton was aiming for someone else. He turned himself in days later. In 2015, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter and aggravated assault. Sentence: 23 years in prison. Think about that. From the Staples Center to a maximum security cell, from running fast breaks to prison yard laps, Crittenton's story is the definition of too dark for ESPN. It's not just a fall from grace. It's a cautionary tale drenched in tragedy for the victim, for his family, and for a kid who once had it all and chose chaos instead. And there you have it, a collection of NBA stories so dark, so twisted, you'll never see them on ESPN unless someone accidentally leaks a documentary. These aren't just cautionary tales. They're brutal reminders that behind the bright lights, million-dollar contracts, and shoe deals, there's a side of the league that no one wants to talk about. The side where addiction, violence, mental health, and pure human tragedy collide with fame. And let's be honest, no amount of triple-doubles or highlight reels can cover that up. Some of these guys turned it around, others not so lucky. And then there are those who left behind only a headline, a mugshot, or a tragic obituary. So next time you're watching the NBA and thinking, man, I wish I had their life, remember, some of them would trade it all just to rewind time, or walk again, or see their kids. This was the dark side of the NBA. The side ESPN won't touch, but we will. If you want more stories like this, hit that like button like it owes you money, subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into basketball madness, and drop a comment. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Or did we miss one even darker? Until next time, keep your jumpers clean and your skeletons buried deep.